Wisdom, wisdom, that's the test. Which rival wisdom team is best? 52 teams of 8 antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries.
Team 16, act wisely. Quote definitions, biographical context, and synergy analysis to replace hate with motivational education to guidealife.com. Quote 16.1. The wise does at once what the fool does at last. Baltasar Gracián 1601-1658. Quote definition. Wisdom and foolishness often arrive at the same destination, but wisdom arrives immediately by deliberate choice, while foolishness arrives only after exhausting every alternative, usually at great cost. The wise person acts on what is true and necessary without requiring the full price of experience to compel them. Quote application. The wise response to hatred, understanding its roots, refusing its logic, extending genuine human connection, is available immediately to anyone willing to act on it. The fool eventually arrives at the same understanding, but only after paying the full tuition of consequences. ReplaceHate.org offers a shortcut. The wisdom that compresses the fool's painful journey into an immediate, available choice. Baltasar Gracián y Morales was born in 1601 in Belmonte de Calatayud, Aragon, in what is now Spain, the son of a physician. He entered the Jesuit order at 18, was ordained a priest, and spent his career as a preacher, college rector, and writer whose practical moral philosophy attracted both admiring readers and the sustained displeasure of his superiors. His three major works, El Hero, the Hero, El Discreto, the Discreet Man, and Oraculo Manual y Arte de Prudencia, the Art of Worldly Wisdom, are manuals of practical intelligence. How to read people, how to navigate institutions, how to act effectively in a world where good intentions alone are insufficient. His Oraculo Manual, a collection of 300 aphorisms with commentary, was translated into every major European language and was an acknowledged influence on Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and a long tradition of practical philosophy. Gracián's observation about the wise and the fool draws from his career-long study of the difference between people who acted on principle immediately and people who acted only when compelled by consequences. He had watched courts, institutions, and individuals repeatedly arrive at the correct position only after it was too late to benefit from having arrived there voluntarily. Discovering the necessity of honesty only after being caught in a lie, discovering the value of loyalty only after betrayal had destroyed their networks, discovering the wisdom of moderation only after excess had done its damage. The fool does not fail to recognize what is right. The fool simply requires the full price of experience before acting on it. The wise person recognizes the same truth earlier and acts on it before the bill arrives. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Develop the habit of acting on recognized wisdom immediately rather than waiting for circumstances to compel the action that principle already recommends. 2. Recognize that the painful path to wisdom through consequences is always available but never necessary. The direct path is also available at any time. 3. Apply this principle to the repair of relationships, the correction of injustice, and the extension of kindness, all of which are easier done immediately than eventually. 4. Understand that the fool is not stupid but merely slow, and that slowness in acting on wisdom is itself a choice that can be changed. Gracián's own relationship with his Jesuit superiors was a sustained illustration of his principle, and of its limits. He knew that publishing his works without proper permission would eventually result in censure. He published anyway, prioritizing the wisdom he wanted to share over the institutional compliance he knew was required. His superiors eventually restricted his activities and confined him to a minor posting. He had acted at once on what he valued. The consequences followed. He did not recant. The art of worldly wisdom outlasted the censure by 4 centuries.
Quote 16.2. Science is the father of knowledge, but opinion breeds ignorance. Hippocrates 460 to 370 BC. Quote definition. Genuine knowledge, reliable, testable, grounded in systematic observation and evidence, is produced by the disciplined inquiry that science represents. Opinion, by contrast, is the assertion conclusions without the discipline of evidence, and it reliably produces the ignorance that mistaken certainty always generates. The false knowledge that crowds out the real. Quote application. Hatred is almost entirely opinion-based. It asserts confident conclusions about entire categories of people without the evidence that genuine knowledge requires. Hippocrates' distinction between the knowledge that science produces and the ignorance that opinion breeds is the intellectual framework for understanding why wisdom education works. It replaces opinion with genuine knowledge about human beings, history, and the actual consequences of cruelty. Hippocrates of Kos was born around 460 BC on the Greek island of Kos and is considered the father of Western medicine, the first person in the Western tradition to systematically separate medical practice from supernatural explanation and ground it in the observation of symptoms, the documentation of cases, and the development of treatments based on what those observations revealed. He established a school of medicine on Kos that trained physicians in empirical methods, produced the Hippocratic Corpus, a collection of approximately 60 medical texts that remain the foundation of European medical education for nearly 2,000 years, and articulated the ethical commitments that the Hippocratic Oath has transmitted to physicians ever since. His distinction between the knowledge that systematic observation produces and the ignorance that confident opinion breeds was drawn from direct medical experience. He had watched physicians of his era and earlier treat patients on the basis of theological and supernatural theories, disease as divine punishment, healing as priestly intervention, and produced consistent failures that their theoretical frameworks prevented them from recognizing as failures because the framework provided an explanation for every outcome that protected it from falsification. He had also watched careful empirical observation produce treatments that actually worked repeatedly and predictably without requiring any supernatural explanation. The contrast between the two approaches was not subtle. One produced knowledge, the other produced confident ignorance that cost patients their lives. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Distinguish between genuine knowledge, grounded in evidence, observation, and systematic inquiry, and the confident opinions that feel like knowledge but are not. 2. Recognize that the most dangerous form of ignorance is not the awareness of not knowing, but the false certainty of unexamined opinion. 3. Apply Hippocrates' standard of social and political claims. What evidence grounds this assertion? What observation supports this conclusion? What would falsify it? 4. Understand that opinion-based certainty about groups of people, the foundation of prejudice, is precisely the ignorance that Hippocrates diagnosed, confident, resistant to correction, and harmful to those subjected to its conclusions. Hippocrates' medical legacy is somewhat complicated by the fact that many of the treatments in the Hippocratic Corpus were themselves based on the theoretical framework of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which was more systematic than supernatural medicine, but still fundamentally wrong. His greatness lay not in the specific theories, but in the method he established. Observe carefully, document honestly, test conclusions against outcomes, revise when evidence demands it. The method outlasted the theories by 25 centuries and produced modern medicine in the process. Science fathered the knowledge. The opinions were eventually replaced.
Quote 16.3. A person should be upright, not be kept upright. Marcus Aurelius 121–180 AD. Quote definition. Genuine virtue is self-sustaining. It arises from internal conviction and character rather than from external enforcement, social pressure, or institutional constraint. A person who is upright only because they are being watched, rewarded, or compelled is not genuinely upright. They are merely compliant, and their compliance is only as reliable as the enforcement mechanism that maintains it. Quote application. The mission of making America wiser and kinder aims at genuine internal transformation, not mere behavioral compliance. Laws can forbid hate crimes. Only genuine character can replace hatred with wisdom. Marcus Aurelius's principle is the case for the deeper work. Not keeping people upright through external constraint, but helping them become people who stand upright on their own. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was born in 121 AD in Rome, the nephew of the Emperor Antoninus Pius, who adopted him and designated him as his successor. He was educated by the finest tutors the empire could provide, including Fronto, the leading Latin rhetorician of the era, and developed a deep commitment to Stoic philosophy that shaped both his personal conduct and his governance. He became emperor in 161 AD and ruled until his death in 180 AD, spending much of his reign on military campaign against Germanic tribes on the northern frontier. Not the peaceful philosophical life he would have preferred, but the one duty required. His Meditations, a private journal of philosophical self-examination written in Greek during the military campaigns, never intended for publication, is one of the most remarkable documents in the history of practical philosophy. It is a sustained, honest, sometimes despairing attempt by a man with absolute power to keep himself upright without being kept upright by anyone, to maintain genuine virtue, genuine humility, genuine concern for others, in a position where no external force could compel him to any of it. He was the most powerful man in the world. No one could keep him upright except himself. The Meditations is the record of his attempt, documented in the full awareness that the attempt was imperfect and the standard was unachievable, but the effort was nonetheless required. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Invest in the internal development of genuine virtue rather than relying on external systems to maintain behavioral compliance. 2. Recognize that character revealed only under observation is not character but performance, and that performance fails whenever the audience is absent. 3. Practice the disciplines, reflection, honest self-examination, deliberate choice, that build the internal uprightness that needs no external support. 4. Apply this principle to the work of social change. Systems and laws that keep people upright are necessary but insufficient. The deeper work is building people who stand upright on their own. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations contains passages of extraordinary honesty about his own failures to live up to his Stoic principles. His anger, his impatience, his frustrated desire for the quiet philosophical life that imperial duty denied him. He did not pretend to be more upright than he was. He simply kept trying to be more upright than he had been. The journal was never meant to be read by anyone else, which is precisely why it can be trusted. It is the record of a man trying to keep himself upright in complete privacy, with no audience to perform for. That is what genuine uprightness looks like.
Quote 16.4. I keep my eyes clear and I hit 'em where they ain't. Wee Willie Keeler, 1872 to 1923. Quote definition. Effective action, in baseball and in life, requires two complementary disciplines: clear-eyed perception of what is actually there, and the intelligence to direct effort toward the undefended spaces rather than the defended ones. See clearly, then act where the resistance is absent rather than where it is concentrated. Quote application. For the mission of spreading wisdom and replacing hate, Keeler's practical genius is the strategic principle: keep perception clear and find the undefended spaces, the audiences genuinely open to wisdom, the communities not yet calcified in hatred, the moments of genuine receptiveness, rather than exhausting all effort against the most entrenched resistance. Clear eyes find the openings that strategy without perception misses. William Henry Keeler, Wee Willie, as he was universally known, standing 5 feet 4.5 inches and weighing approximately 140 pounds, was born in 1872 in Brooklyn, New York, and became one of the most skilled and most celebrated baseball players of the deadball era. He played outfield for the Baltimore Orioles, Brooklyn Superbas, and New York Highlanders among other teams, compiled a career batting average of .341 across 19 Major League seasons, and holds the National League record for consecutive games with a hit, 44 straight games in 1897, a record that stood for decades. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1939. His formulation of his batting philosophy, "I keep my eyes clear and I hit 'em where they ain't," is one of the most quoted observations in the history of American sport, and its wisdom extends far beyond baseball. The two clauses are inseparable and equally important. Clear eyes, accurate, unbiased perception unclouded by preconception, wishful thinking, or distorting assumption, are the prerequisite for hitting where they ain't, because you cannot identify the undefended spaces if your perception is compromised. And hitting where they ain't, directing effort toward opportunity rather than obstacle, is the application of that clear perception in practical action. Together they describe a complete epistemology of effective action. See what is actually there, then act where the conditions favor success. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Develop and maintain the clear-eyed perception that is the prerequisite for all effective action, which means actively resisting the distortions of bias, wishful thinking, and preconception. 2. Look for the undefended spaces, The opportunities that concentrated effort in the wrong direction has been missing, rather than directing all energy against the most resistant obstacles. 3. Recognize that the combination of accurate perception and strategic direction is more effective than either alone. Clear eyes without strategic application produce observation without impact. Strategy without clear eyes produces effort misdirected. 4. Apply this principle to the work of social change. Where are the undefended spaces, the genuinely open audiences, the receptive communities, the accessible moments, that concentrated attention on the most resistant positions has been overlooking? Keeler's batting philosophy was the product of necessity as much as genius. At his size, in an era of dead balls and large outfields, he could not compete with power hitters on their terms. He had to develop a different approach, one that required clearer eyes about what was actually possible and more creative direction of effort toward what those clear eyes revealed as available. His limitations forced the innovation that made him exceptional. He saw what larger, stronger hitters didn't need to see, and hit where their assumptions about the game left undefended.
Quote 16.5 Sunlight is painting. Moonlight is sculpture. Nathaniel Hawthorne 1804–1864. Quote definition. Different forms of illumination reveal different kinds of truth. Sunlight, direct, revealing, showing color and detail with unsparing clarity, is the light of painting. What is seen is what is there. Moonlight, indirect, selective, creating shadow and mystery that sunlight dissolves, is the light of sculpture. Form and depth emerge from what is hidden as much as from what is shown. Reality has multiple valid registers of truth, each revealing what the other conceals. Quote application. Wisdom requires more than one kind of seeing. The direct, evidence-based clarity that sunlight represents is essential, but the moonlight register, which attends to what is hidden, symbolic, and emotionally true, is equally necessary for understanding human beings in their full complexity. Replacing hate requires both: the clear factual light that refutes lies, and the deeper illumination that reveals the humanity concealed beneath the surfaces of difference. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts, into a family with deep roots in the Puritan history of New England, roots that included a judge who had presided over the Salem witch trials and whose legacy Hawthorne carried with a sense of inherited guilt that shaped everything he wrote. He was educated at Bowdoin College, where his classmates included Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and future President Franklin Pierce, and spent 12 years of near solitude in Salem after graduation, reading, writing, and developing the moral and psychological vision that would make him one of the most important American novelists of the 19th century. The Scarlet Letter, The House of the Seven Gables, and the Blithedale Romance are works of extraordinary psychological depth that use the Puritan past as a lens for examining the universal human tendencies toward guilt, concealment, and the judgment of others. Hawthorne's observation about sunlight and moonlight as painting and sculpture reflects his characteristic dual vision: the ability to see in both the direct, revelatory light of realism and the indirect, shadow-creating light of romance and symbolism. He understood that the full truth about human beings, their inner lives, their hidden motivations, their concealed guilts and loves and fears, was not fully accessible to the sunlight of documentary realism. It required the moonlight of symbolic narrative, which could reveal through indirection what direct light could not show. His fiction operates precisely in the moonlight register. It shows you the shape of things through the shadows they cast, and what it reveals about human nature is often more accurate than what direct documentary reporting could provide. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Develop comfort with multiple registers of truth: the direct evidential clarity of sunlight and the indirect, depth-revealing illumination of moonlight, recognizing that different questions require different kinds of seeing. 2. Apply the moonlight register to understanding other people. The visible surface rarely contains the full truth of who someone is, and the shadows cast by what is hidden often reveal more than what is directly shown. 3. Resist the reduction of truth to a single mode. All sunlight produces flat clarity without depth. All moonlight produces atmospheric obscurity without grounding. Wisdom moves between both. 4. Recognize that art, literature, and the symbolic dimensions of human expression are legitimate and necessary forms of knowledge, not decoration added to factual understanding but a different and equally valid way of seeing. Hawthorne's friend Herman Melville read The Scarlet Letter and wrote that there was a great power of blackness in Hawthorne that derived from his innate sense of depravity and original sin. He meant it as the highest compliment. Hawthorne could see in the moonlight register what sunlight-only writers missed. His fiction illuminated, through shadow, symbol, and the indirect light of romance, truths about guilt, complicity, and the human capacity for self-deception that direct realistic narrative could not have reached. He painted in sunlight and sculpted in moonlight, and both were necessary.
Quote 16.6. A fool must now and then be right by chance. William Cooper, 1731 to 1800. Quote definition. Even the least reliable reasoner will occasionally arrive at a correct conclusion, not through wisdom or method, but through the statistical inevitability that random assertions will sometimes align with reality. The point is not that fools are occasionally right, but that being occasionally right by chance is not evidence of wisdom, and should not be mistaken for it. Quote application. Hatred occasionally produces correct observations. A hateful person may accurately identify a real problem while completely misdiagnosing its cause or solution. Cooper's principle is the tool for distinguishing accidental correctness from genuine wisdom. The question is not whether a conclusion happens to be right, but whether the method that produced it is reliable. A broken clock is right twice a day. That is not a reason to trust broken clocks. William Cooper appears in Team 14 as well, where his observation about remorse and the fatal egg that pleasure laid addressed the inevitable consequences of undisciplined desire. Here in Team 16, his drier wit takes center stage. Cooper was born in 1731 in Great Berkhamsted, Hertfordshire, and spent a life marked by severe mental illness, deep religious conviction, and a gift for both tender lyric poetry and sharp satirical observation that rarely get full credit, because his reputation rests primarily on the hymns he co-wrote with John Newton. His long poem, The Task, a rambling, observational work about rural life and the life of the mind, contains some of the sharpest social commentary of the 18th century, wrapped in a deceptively gentle conversational tone. The observation about fools being occasionally right by chance is characteristic of Cooper's satirical mode. It looks like a generous concession, but is actually a precise diagnosis. He had spent a lifetime observing the confident pronouncements of people whose methods were unreliable, in politics, in theology, in social life, and watching those pronouncements occasionally hit the mark through sheer probabilistic luck, which their authors then cited as evidence of their judgment. He understood that the occasional correctness of bad methods was not a vindication of those methods, but a statistical artifact that the undiscriminating mind mistakes for competence. The fool is right now and then. The wise person is right systematically. The difference is not in the individual outcomes, but in the reliability of the process. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Evaluate methods and processes rather than individual outcomes. The occasional correctness of a bad method is not evidence that the method is good. 2. Resist the confirmation bias that treats random hits as confirmation of judgment while ignoring the systematic misses that the same method produces. 3. Apply this diagnostic to hateful ideologies. They are occasionally right about real problems, even when their explanations and proposed solutions are systematically wrong. The occasional hit should not be mistaken for reliable analysis. For develop the habit of asking not just, was this conclusion correct, but is the method that produced it reliable? Only the second question distinguishes wisdom from luck. Cooper's own mental illness gave him a particular understanding of the relationship between confident assertion and actual reliability. During his periods of deepest depression, he was absolutely certain, with a conviction that felt unshakable, that he was personally and specifically damned, excluded from salvation by divine decree. He was wrong. The certainty was no guide to the truth. The fool's occasional rightness and the mad person's absolute certainty share a common feature. The strength of the conviction tells you nothing about the validity of the conclusion. Cooper knew this from the inside and wrote about it with the precision of someone who had paid the full tuition.
Quote 16.7. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Thomas Paine, 1737 to 1809. Quote definition. The value and the glory of any achievement are proportional to the difficulty of what was overcome to reach it. Easy victories produce modest satisfaction. Triumphs wrested from genuine, sustained, Costly conflict produce the most enduring and most meaningful sense of achievement. Difficulty is not the enemy of glory but its source. Quote application. The work of replacing hate with wisdom is genuinely hard. It faces entrenched resistance, slow progress, and the full weight of deeply held beliefs and social inertia. Paine's principle reframes that difficulty not as a reason for discouragement, but as the measure of what the eventual triumph will mean. The harder the conflict, the more the world will have actually changed when it is won. Thomas Paine was born in 1737 in Thetford, Norfolk, England, the son of a Quaker corset maker, and received only a basic education before working as a corset maker himself, then as an excise officer, a position he was twice dismissed from. He emigrated to Philadelphia in 1774 at 37, carrying a letter of introduction from Benjamin Franklin, and within 2 years had written Common Sense, a 50-page pamphlet arguing for American independence from Britain with a directness and force that no previous colonial writer had achieved. Published in January 1776, it sold approximately 500,000 copies in a population of 2.5 million, proportionally the best-selling American title in history, and is widely credited with shifting colonial public opinion decisively toward independence. The observation about conflict and triumph comes from The American Crisis, the series of pamphlets Paine wrote during the darkest periods of the Revolutionary War, beginning with the famous opening. These are the times that try men's souls, written in December 1776 when Washington's army was in retreat across New Jersey and the revolution appeared to be failing. Paine was writing directly to soldiers and citizens on the edge of giving up, and his argument was not sentimental encouragement but a genuine philosophical claim. The difficulty of the conflict was itself the measure of what was at stake and what the victory would mean. He had staked everything he had on the revolution: his reputation, his safety, his freedom, and he was telling the people around him that the price was worth paying precisely because what they were fighting for was worth the difficulty of fighting for it. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Reframe difficulty not as evidence that a cause is failing but as a measure of what is genuinely at stake and how significant the achievement will be. 2. Resist the discouragement that hard conflict naturally produces by understanding that the hardness is proportional to the importance of what is being contested. 3. Draw motivation from the magnitude of the opposition. If it were not worth opposing, it would not be so strongly opposed. 4. Apply Paine's principle to the long-term work of social transformation. The changes that matter most are the hardest to achieve, and the glory of achieving them is correspondingly greatest. Thomas Paine died in 1809 in New York City in poverty and near total social disgrace. His Age of Reason, which attacked organized religion, had alienated the religious establishment, and his Rights of Man, which attacked hereditary aristocracy, had made him an outlaw in Britain. Only 6 people attended his funeral. Yet his ideas about democratic government, about human rights, about the right of people to overthrow unjust authority, had helped create the United States of America and contributed to the French Revolution and the subsequent wave of democratic reform that reshaped Western civilization. The conflict had been very hard. The triumph, measured across 2 centuries, was very glorious. He did not live to see it.
Quote 16.8. We should be too big to take offense and too noble to give it. Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. Quote definition. Genuine greatness of character, moral bigness and nobility, expresses itself in 2 complementary disciplines: the magnanimity that refuses to be diminished by others' attempts to diminish it, and the elevation that refuses to diminish others in return. The truly great person neither receives petty offense nor delivers it, because both are beneath the standard their character has set. Quote application. This is the operating standard for the ReplaceHate.org mission in its daily conduct. Too big to take offense, not because offenses aren't real, but because the mission's dignity does not depend on winning every small battle. Too noble to give it, because the mission that responds to hatred with contempt has descended to hatred's level and lost the moral high ground that is its most powerful resource. Abraham Lincoln appears in teams 11, 12, and now 16. The depth and consistency of his wisdom across domains is sufficient to justify his presence in multiple teams without repetition. Each appearance draws on a different dimension of his character and a different episode of his life. Here, the focus is on his practice of magnanimity, the bigness that refused offense, as demonstrated across one of the most hostile and personally vicious political careers in American history. Lincoln was subjected to relentless personal attacks throughout his presidency. His physical appearance was mocked as grotesque, his intelligence was dismissed as that of an uneducated backwoodsman, his character was impugned by political opponents of every faction, his wife was accused of Confederate sympathies, and his conduct of the war was attacked from every direction simultaneously. He was called a guerrilla, a baboon, a tyrant, and a coward, often in the same day's newspapers. His response to virtually all of this was to decline to respond, to refuse the offense that was being offered, not from passivity or weakness, but from a genuine understanding that the work of preserving the Union and ending slavery was too important to be distracted by the petty battles his opponents wanted to fight. He was too big to take offense because he understood what bigness actually required. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Develop the magnanimity that refuses to be diminished by others' attempts at diminishment, not by suppressing the recognition of offense, but by being genuinely too large for it to take hold. 2. Practice the nobility that declines to deliver offense even when provoked, not from weakness, but from the understanding that delivering petty offense is incompatible with genuine greatness. 3. Apply this standard to the work of replacing hate specifically. The mission that responds to hatred with contempt has adopted the weapon it opposes, and the adoption contaminates the mission. 4. Recognize that the combination of these two disciplines, too big to receive, too noble to give, is itself a form of power, because it operates from a moral height that petty offense cannot reach. Lincoln's second inaugural address, 6 weeks before his assassination, is the most complete expression of this principle in American political history, with malice toward none, with charity for all. He was addressing a nation in which half the population had been trying for 4 years to destroy the government he led. He proposed to respond with charity. He was too big to take the offense that the war had offered, and too noble to give it back. He was killed before he could demonstrate whether the principle was practically achievable at the scale of national reconciliation. The loss of that demonstration may be the most consequential unfinished experiment in American history.
How they work together as a unified philosophy. The Act Wisely framework. Knowledge layer. Acting on wisdom immediately and grounding it in evidence. Quotes 1-2. Gracián. Establish the first principle of wise action. The wise person acts at once on what they know to be true and right, without requiring the full price of consequences to compel them, making immediacy the distinguishing mark of wisdom over foolishness. Hippocrates. Ground that wise action in genuine knowledge rather than confident opinion. Science fathers knowledge while opinion breeds ignorance. Ensuring that what the wise person acts on immediately is actually true rather than merely confidently believed. Together, define the complete epistemology and the timing of wise action. Gracián establishes when the wise person acts, immediately on recognized truth, while Hippocrates establishes what they act on, genuine evidence-based knowledge, rather than the confident opinion that produces ignorance. Together they describe wise action as both timely and grounded, neither delayed by cowardice nor misdirected by false certainty. Character layer. Internal uprightness and clear-eyed perception. Quotes 3-4. Marcus Aurelius. Establish the internal foundation of wise action. Genuine uprightness that needs no external support, as the character quality that makes all other wise action reliable rather than merely situational. Keeler. Provide the perceptual discipline that wise action requires. Clear eyes that see what is actually there, as the practical operating method that converts genuine character into effective strategic engagement. Together, build the character and the perception that wise action requires. Marcus Aurelius provides the inner foundation, uprightness that is self-sustaining rather than externally maintained, while Keeler provides the outer orientation, clear-eyed perception of where effort should actually be directed. Together they describe the wise actor in full, standing upright on their own, seeing clearly where to act, and hitting where the resistance is absent rather than concentrated. Vision layer. Multiple registers of truth and the limits of chance. Quotes 5-6. Hawthorne. Expand the wise person's vision to include both the direct clarity of sunlight and the depth-revealing illumination of moonlight, recognizing that full truth requires multiple registers of seeing, not just the single mode of direct evidence. Cooper, refine the wise person's epistemic standards by distinguishing systematic reliability from accidental correctness. A fool is occasionally right by chance, but wisdom is defined by method rather than individual outcome. Together, equip the wise actor with both the expanded vision and the refined judgment necessary for acting well in a complex world. Hawthorne ensures that the wise person does not reduce all truth to a single register, missing the depths that only moonlight reveals. Cooper ensures that the wise person does not confuse occasional correctness with systematic reliability. The method matters more than any single outcome. Together they describe the epistemically sophisticated wise actor, seeing in multiple registers, evaluating by method rather than result. Nobility layer. Triumph through difficulty and magnanimity in conduct. Quote 7-8. Pain. Provide the motivational reframe that sustains wise action through the inevitable difficulty. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph, converting the measure of opposition into the measure of the achievement's significance. Lincoln. Establish the conduct standard for wise action under fire. Too big to take offense, too noble to give it, as the operating posture that maintains the moral high ground that wise action requires to remain genuinely wise rather than merely effective. Together, complete the framework with its motivational and ethical architecture. Pain ensures that difficulty is read correctly, as the measure of significance rather than the signal of failure, while Lincoln ensures that the response to difficulty maintains the nobility that distinguishes wise action from merely clever action. Together they describe the wise actor at full stretch, motivated by the glory proportional to the difficulty, conducted with the magnanimity that refuses both received and delivered pettiness.
Free easy extra advantage math, spelling and reading workbooks you can download for free at stop2think.com or buy at educationstopshate.com. Free easy math wisdom workbooks with octo repetition to grow math self-confidence. You'll get plenty of repetitive practice of age ranges and averages of our 52 teams of 8 quote authors. Free easy alpha cipher-coded puzzles teach letters, numbers, and phrases using antique wisdoms that encourage and educate. Can you decode this cipher quote of encouragement using either our learning to spell or just for fun instructions? And since time is money, practice reading faster with 52 teams of antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. We offer printed versions and timed videos with background music. Sign up for free weekly emails of 52 teams of antique rival wisdom workbooks with easy math, spelling, and reading practice. And, if you'd like to get paid for sharing our wearable wisdoms, keep this in mind. Everyone I know wears a shirt, and most of us change them daily, so change your shirt and change the world. Social equalities are blatantly subliminal antique positive wisdoms repetitively shared without saying a word. This applies to all our wearable shareable wisdoms. Like pretty witty baby onesies and baby tees that you and others will see and read multiple times a day. The same is true with pretty witty kids, but they'll also share these wisdoms with anyone that can read at daycare or school. Youthful truths let your kids gain confidence sharing antique wisdoms with their friends. Imagine them sharing words of wisdom with classmates and teachers. I think, therefore I think tees I wear is a super easy way to share words of wisdom that have passed the test of time. Our social equalities help make us all wiser and kinder with blatantly subliminal messages promoting a more fair and equal opportunity society for all. And don't forget our giftwisdoms.com for birthdays and holidays that makes it easy to share the wisdom with clothing, coffee mugs, and magnets. So do the future a favor by encouraging, educating, and entertaining with words of wisdom that have passed the test of time to make us all wiser and kinder. With wearable wisdoms to fit babies, kids, and adults. You can clothe a whole family, city, or state. Join the 52 of 8 today.